The scalding water hit Helena Livingston's legs before she even saw her mother-in-law's face twist with rage, and in that instant her entire world shattered into nothing but white-hot agony that made her collapse onto the kitchen floor of the cramped farmhouse outside Shafter, Texas. It was August of 1882, and the heat already made the small house feel like an oven even before Martha Whitmore had heated that kettle to boiling. Helena had been married to Daniel Whitmore for barely 3 months, and those 3 months had been the most miserable of her 21 years on this earth. She had thought marriage would bring her freedom from her father's strict household in San Antonio, but instead she had traded one prison for another. Daniel worked the cotton fields from dawn until dusk, leaving her alone with his parents, who seemed to despise everything about her. She was too educated, they said, too proud, too unwilling to accept that a wife should know her place and keep silent. The argument that morning had started over something trivial. Helena had suggested they might plant vegetables in the small plot behind the house instead of letting it go to waste. Martha had taken offense, saying that Helena was implying she did not know how to manage a household. The words had escalated quickly, with Martha's voice rising to a shrill pitch as she accused Helena of trying to take over, of thinking herself better than the Whitmores who had worked this land for 2 generations. Helena had tried to apologize, tried to smooth things over, but Martha's anger had only grown. She had grabbed the kettle from the stove, and Helena had seen the intention in her eyes just a moment too late. She had tried to step back, but Martha moved faster than Helena would have thought possible for a woman of 53 years. The water soaked through Helena's cotton dress and found her skin, and she screamed. She screamed until her throat was raw, collapsing onto the wooden floor as her legs burned with a pain unlike anything she had ever imagined. Through her tears, she could see Martha standing over her, the empty kettle still in her hand, her face pale as she seemed to realize what she had done. "You made me do this," Martha said, her voice shaking. "You pushed me too far." Helena could not respond. The pain consumed every thought, every breath. She heard footsteps, heard Daniel's father Samuel come running from the barn. She heard voices arguing above her, but the words made no sense through the roaring in her ears. She did not know how long she lay there. Time became meaningless, measured only in waves of agony. Eventually, she felt hands on her, lifting her. She cried out, but the hands were gentle. Through the haze, she recognized Samuel's weathered face. "We need to get her to a doctor," Samuel said, his voice grim. "The nearest real doctor is in Fort Davis. That is 2 days' ride," Martha protested. "We cannot afford that, and besides, people will ask questions." "Then what do you suggest? Let the girl die?" "There is that Cowboy, the one who has been working the Robertson Ranch. I heard he has some medical knowledge, picked it up during the war." Helena wanted to protest, wanted to demand they take her to a real doctor, but she could not form the words. The pain had stolen her voice. Samuel carried her outside to the wagon, and she whimpered as the movement jarred her burned legs. The morning sun was brutal and bright, and she closed her eyes against it. She felt the wagon bed beneath her, felt a blanket being draped over her upper body. The wool scratched against her skin, but she was shaking despite the heat. The wagon ride was torture. Every bump in the road sent fresh waves of pain through her legs. She bit her lip until she tasted blood, trying not to scream. Samuel drove the wagon himself, and she could hear Martha beside him, making excuses, explaining how it had been an accident, how Helena had startled her. The lies made Helena feel sick, but she was too weak to contradict them. She drifted in and out of consciousness, the pain pulling her under like dark water. When the wagon finally stopped, she heard new voices. A man's voice, deep and calm, asking what had happened. Samuel's explanation, carefully edited to make it sound like a tragic accident. The blanket was pulled back, and Helena squinted up at the face now looking down at her. He was younger than she had expected, perhaps 26 or 27, with dark hair that needed cutting and eyes the color of stormy skies. His face was tanned from years in the sun, with lines around his eyes that spoke of squinting across vast distances. There was something solid about him, something steady that made her want to trust him even in her pain-addled state. "I am Ethan Quinn," he said, and his voice was as gentle as his expression. "I am going to help you, miss, but I need to see the burns first." Helena nodded weakly. Ethan called for someone to bring water and clean cloths, then carefully moved to examine her legs. When he lifted the hem of her dress, Helena heard his sharp intake of breath. "How long ago did this happen?" Ethan asked, and there was an edge to his voice now. "About 2 hours," Samuel said. "It was an accident. Martha was carrying the kettle, and Helena startled her." Ethan's eyes flicked to Helena's face, and she saw the question there. She wanted to tell him the truth, but Martha was standing right there, and Helena was too afraid and too hurt to speak. She looked away, ashamed of her cowardice. "These are serious burns," Ethan said flatly. "Second degree, possibly some third-degree areas. She is going to need intensive care for weeks, maybe months. The risk of infection is severe." "Can you help her?" Samuel asked. Ethan was quiet for a moment, still looking at Helena's legs with a grim expression. "I can try, but she cannot be moved again, not for a while. The burns need to be cleaned and dressed immediately, and she will need constant monitoring." "We can take her home and you can visit," Martha said quickly. "No." Ethan's voice was firm. "She stays here. I have a spare room in my cabin, and she will need round-the-clock care for at least the first week. After that, we can reassess." Martha started to protest, but Samuel cut her off. "We will pay you for your trouble." "I do not want your money," Ethan said, "but I will need supplies. Clean cotton for bandages, honey if you have it, lavender oil, willow bark for the pain. And I will need you to leave now so I can start treatment." The dismissal was clear. Samuel nodded and took Martha's arm, steering her away despite her protests. Helena heard the wagon pull away, and then she was alone with this stranger who had promised to help her. Ethan crouched down beside the wagon, his face level with hers. "I'm going to be honest with you," he said quietly. "This is going to hurt. I need to clean the burns, and there is no way to do it that will not cause you pain. But if I do not clean them properly, infection will set in, and you could lose your legs or worse. Do you understand?" Helena nodded, tears already streaming down her face. "Please," she whispered, "just do what you need to do." Something shifted in Ethan's expression, a softness that had not been there before. "You are braver than you know," he said. "Hold on to that." He lifted her from the wagon with surprising gentleness, carrying her toward a small cabin set back from the main ranch buildings. The cabin was simple but clean, with whitewashed walls and windows that let in the bright Texas sunlight. He took her to a small bedroom that held only a narrow bed and a wooden chest, laying her down carefully on the quilt. "I am going to cut away your dress," Ethan said. "I am sorry, but I need access to the burns." Helena nodded, past the point of modesty. The pain had stripped away all pretense. She closed her eyes as she felt the cold metal of scissors against her legs, heard the fabric tearing. The air against her burned skin brought fresh agony, and she bit down on her lip again. "Easy," Ethan murmured. "Breathe through it." He worked with quick efficiency, and Helena could tell he had done this before. His hands were steady as he cleaned the burns with cool water, gentle despite the pain each touch caused. She gripped the quilt beneath her until her knuckles were white, tears running freely down her face. "Talk to me," Ethan said as he worked. "Tell me something about yourself. It will help." "What?" Helena gasped. "Anything. Where are you from?" "San Antonio," Helena managed. "Lived there until I married Daniel 3 months ago." "Do you miss it?" "Every day." The admission came out before she could stop it, and she saw Ethan glance at her face. "What do you miss most?" Helena tried to focus on the question instead of the pain. "The cathedral. My father used to take me there on Sundays. The light would come through the windows in these beautiful patterns, all gold and blue. I would sit and watch the dust motes dance in the sunbeams. That sounds peaceful, Ethan said. He was applying something cool to her burns now, and it eased the fire in her skin just slightly. I went to San Antonio once, about 5 years back. Beautiful city. Where are you from? Helena asked, desperate to keep talking, to think about anything other than her legs. Kansas, originally. My family had a farm outside Lawrence. I left during the war, served as a field medic with the Union Army. After the war ended, I could not go back. Too many memories, so I drifted south, ended up here in Texas. His voice was matter of fact, but Helena heard the pain beneath the words. Do you have any family left? A sister in Chicago. We write when we can. Ethan finished applying the salve and began wrapping her legs with clean cotton strips. That husband of yours, does he know his mother did this to you? The question caught Helena off guard. She opened her eyes and found Ethan watching her, his gray eyes steady and knowing. It was an accident, she said automatically. No one accidentally throws boiling water on another person's legs, Ethan said quietly. The pattern of the burns, the location, the severity. This was not a spill or a splash. Someone poured that water deliberately. Helena looked away, shame burning in her chest. Daniel was in the fields. He does not know yet. And when he does know, what will he do? I do not know, Helena whispered. He loves his mother. He always takes her side. Ethan was silent for a moment, his hands still working to bandage her legs. You do not have to go back there, he finally said. When you heal, you do not have to return to that house. I am married, Helena said. I have nowhere else to go. That is not true, but we do not need to talk about that now. Ethan finished the bandaging and pulled a light sheet over her legs. I am going to make you some willow bark tea for the pain. It will not take all of it away, but it should help you sleep. Helena watched him leave the room, heard him moving around in what must be the kitchen area of the cabin. She stared at the ceiling, trying to process everything that had happened. This morning she had woken in her marriage bed, and now she was lying in a stranger's cabin with burns covering both legs, her mother-in-law's hatred made manifest in scalded flesh. Ethan returned with a cup of steaming tea, helping her sit up enough to drink it. The liquid was bitter, but Helena drank it all, grateful for anything that might dull the pain. As she lay back down, she felt exhaustion pulling at her like a tide. Sleep, Ethan said. I will be right outside if you need anything. Thank you, Helena whispered, for helping me, for believing me. I did not say I believed you, Ethan said, but there was kindness in his voice. You did not actually tell me anything, but I saw enough to know the truth, and that is sufficient for now. Rest. Helena closed her eyes and let the darkness take her. The days that followed blurred together in a haze of pain and fever. Ethan was constantly there, changing her bandages twice a day, applying fresh salve, helping her sip water and broth when she could keep it down. The burns became infected despite his careful treatment, and for several days Helena drifted in and out of consciousness, her body burning with fever. She had fragmented memories of those days. Ethan's cool hand on her forehead, his voice calm and steady, telling her to hold on. The pain of having her bandages changed, which made her cry out even in her fevered state. Once she woke to find him sitting beside her bed in the dark, keeping watch, and she wondered if he ever slept. On the 5th day, the fever broke. Helena woke to find weak sunlight streaming through the window, and for the first time since the burning, her head felt clear. The pain in her legs was still intense, but it no longer consumed her entire world. Ethan must have heard her stirring, because he appeared in the doorway within moments. You are awake, he said, and the relief in his voice was palpable. Really awake this time, I mean. How do you feel? Like I was trampled by a horse, Helena said, her voice hoarse from disuse, but better than I did. Ethan smiled, and Helena realized it was the first real smile she had seen from him. It transformed his face, making him look younger and less careworn. That is good to hear. Are you hungry? I have some chicken broth warming on the stove. Helena realized she was starving. Yes, please. He brought her the broth, and Helena struggled to sit up on her own, not wanting to be helpless. Ethan helped prop her up with pillows, careful not to jostle her legs. The broth was simple but delicious, and Helena drank it eagerly. Has Daniel come? She asked when she finished. Ethan's expression darkened. He came once, the second day. His mother was with him. She did most of the talking, asking when you would be well enough to come home. Your husband barely said a word. The words hurt more than Helena wanted to admit. Did he ask to see me? No. I told them you were too sick for visitors, that the infection was serious. They left after about 10 minutes. Helena set down the empty bowl, blinking back tears. Daniel had not even asked to see her. His mother had burned her, possibly tried to kill her, and he had not even wanted to check on her himself. I am sorry, Ethan said quietly. That is not the reaction you deserved. How do you know what I deserve? Helena asked, more sharply than she intended. You do not know anything about me. I know you love churches with colored light through the windows. I know you are brave enough to endure terrible pain without complaint. I know you think you have nowhere to go and no choices, but you are wrong about that. Ethan's voice was gentle but firm. That is more than enough to know you deserve better than what those people have given you. Helena looked at him, really looked at him, and saw something in his eyes that made her breath catch. Compassion, yes, but also something deeper, something that scared her because it felt like hope, and hope was dangerous. Tell me about the war, she said, changing the subject. You said you were a medic? Ethan settled into the chair beside her bed, seeming to understand that she needed the distraction. I was a farmhand before the war, but my father had taught me some basic medicine. He was the closest thing our county had to a doctor. When I enlisted, they found out I could read and write and had some medical knowledge, so they put me in the medical corps. I spent 4 years patching up soldiers, trying to keep them alive long enough to get to a real surgeon. That must have been hard, Helena said softly. It was the hardest thing I have ever done, and the most important. Ethan's eyes were distant, seeing things Helena could not imagine. I saw so many boys die. Some of them were younger than me, just 16 or 17, crying for their mothers as they bled out in my arms. But the ones I saved, the ones I managed to keep alive, those made it worth it. Is that why you helped me? Because of the war? I helped you because no one deserves to suffer like that, especially not at the hands of someone who should be family. Ethan's eyes focused on her again. But yes, the war taught me that I could not stand by and do nothing when someone was hurting. I have seen too much death to accept it when it can be prevented. They talked for hours that day, and Helena learned more about Ethan Quinn than she knew about the man she had married. Ethan told her about growing up in Kansas, about learning to read by lamplight after his farm chores were done, about his sister Margaret who had married a lawyer and moved to Chicago. He spoke of the war with a quiet sorrow that made Helena's heart ache, and of the years after when he had wandered from town to town, never quite finding a place that felt like home. In turn, Helena found herself telling him things she had never told anyone, about her mother dying when she was 10, leaving her alone with a father who was stern and distant, about the books she had read in secret, borrowed from a kind neighbor who had encouraged her love of learning, about how she had agreed to marry Daniel because he had seemed kind and she had been desperate to escape her father's house, only to discover too late that kindness was not the same as strength. The days turned into weeks. Ethan changed her bandages every morning and evening, and Helena grew accustomed to the routine of it. The pain slowly lessened, though it never fully went away. The burns were healing, but slowly, and Ethan warned her that she would have scars. They will fade with time, he said as he applied fresh salve one morning. But they will always be there. I do not care about scars, Helena said. I just want to be able to walk again. You will walk, Ethan assured her, but we need to be patient. If you try to put weight on your legs too soon, you could tear the healing skin. That would set us back weeks, or even cause permanent damage. It was frustrating to be so helpless. Helena had always been independent, and now she had to rely on Ethan for everything. He helped her wash, helped her use the chamber pot, brought her every meal. She should have been mortified, but somehow with Ethan it felt different. He was always respectful, always gentle, treating her dignity with the same care he treated her burns. Daniel came again in the third week. This time he came alone, and Ethan let him into the bedroom for a few minutes. Helena's heart had lifted when she saw him, hoping that maybe he had finally come to his senses, that he would tell her he was sorry, and that he was leaving his parents' house so they could start fresh somewhere else. But Daniel just stood awkwardly by the door, not meeting her eyes. "Mother says you should be better by now," he said. "She thinks you are pretending to be worse than you are to punish her." The words struck Helena like a physical blow. Punish her? "Daniel, your mother threw boiling water on me. I nearly died from the infection." "It was an accident," Daniel said, but his voice lacked conviction. "You startled her." "No, Daniel, it was not an accident. She was angry with me, and she deliberately poured that kettle over my legs. You know how she has been treating me. You have seen it." "You are exaggerating. Mother can be difficult, but she would never do something like that on purpose." Daniel's voice was rising, defensive. "You are just trying to turn me against her." "I am telling you the truth." Helena felt tears burning her eyes. "Why will you not believe me?" "I am your wife. And she is my mother. She raised me, sacrificed for me. What have you done except complain and make trouble?" The words were harsh, and Helena saw Daniel's face flush with anger. "The Quinn fellow says you will be able to travel in another week or so. When you can, you are coming home, and you are going to apologize to Mother for the trouble you have caused." "I will not apologize for being burned," Helena said, her voice shaking. "And I will not go back to that house. You are my wife. You will go where I tell you to go." Daniel turned toward the door. "I will come for you in a week." He left before Helena could respond, and she heard him talking to Ethan in the other room. She could not make out the words, but she heard the anger in Daniel's voice and the calm steadiness of Ethan's responses. Then the door slammed, and there was silence. Ethan appeared in the doorway a moment later, his face grim. "I am guessing that did not go well." Helena shook her head, unable to speak past the lump in her throat. She felt like a fool. She had married Daniel thinking he would protect her, would be her partner, but instead he had chosen his mother's lies over his wife's truth. "You do not have to go with him," Ethan said, coming to sit beside her bed. "I meant what I said before. When you are healed, you can leave. Get an annulment or a divorce. Start over somewhere else." "With what money? What prospects?" "A divorced woman is ruined, Ethan. No one would hire me. No one would help me." Helena wiped at her tears angrily. "I am trapped." "You are not trapped. You are hurt and scared, but you are not trapped." Ethan's hand covered hers, warm and solid. "I will help you. Whatever you need to start fresh, I will help you find a way." "Why?" Helena asked, looking up at him. "Why would you do that for me? You barely know me." Ethan was quiet for a long moment, his gray eyes searching her face. "Because I see something in you that reminds me of myself after the war. That trapped feeling, like the world has broken you, and there is no way to put the pieces back together. But I was wrong about that. And so are you. We can heal. We can start over. I believe that, and I want you to believe it too." Helena wanted to believe him. Looking into his eyes, seeing the earnestness there, she almost did. "I do not know how," she whispered. "One day at a time," Ethan said. "One step at a time. And the first step is getting you healed. So let us focus on that." Over the following days, Helena began to test her legs. Ethan helped her sit up at the edge of the bed, letting her feet dangle without putting weight on them. The sensation was strange after so many weeks of lying down, and her legs ached fiercely even from that small movement. But it was progress. The next day, he helped her stand, supporting her weight entirely as she found her balance. Her legs shook and the scars pulled tight, but they held. Helena felt tears of relief streaming down her face. Good, Ethan said, his arm steady around her waist. You are doing so well. Just a few seconds more, then we will sit you back down. They repeated this exercise twice a day, gradually increasing the time Helena spent standing. After a few days, she was able to take a single shuffling step, then two, then three. Each movement was agony, but it was the sweetest agony Helena had ever known because it meant freedom. One evening, as Ethan helped her walk from the bedroom to the kitchen table for dinner, Helena realized she was happy. Despite the pain, despite the fear of what came next, she was happy in this moment. She was making progress. She was growing stronger, and she was not alone. You are smiling, Ethan observed as he helped her into a chair. I am happy to be sitting at a table like a normal person, Helena said. But it was more than that, and she thought maybe Ethan knew it. They ate dinner together, something they had been doing ever since Helena was well enough to stay awake for more than a few hours at a time. Ethan was a surprisingly good cook, and he had made a simple stew with vegetables from the ranch's garden. As they ate, they talked about everything and nothing. Ethan told her about the Robertson Ranch where he worked, about the cattle drives, and the work of being a cowboy. Helena told him more about San Antonio, about her dreams of maybe opening a school someday, teaching children to read. You would be a wonderful teacher, Ethan said. You have the patience for it, and the love of learning shows in everything you say. That is a kind thought, but unlikely to happen, Helena said. Women do not just open schools. Some do. I read about a woman in Kansas who started a school for freed slaves right after the war. If she could do that in the face of all that opposition, surely you could find a way too. Helena smiled at his optimism, even as she doubted it could come true. But his belief in her meant something. It made her feel less small, less powerless. As the days passed, Helena grew stronger. She could walk from room to room with only a cane for support, though her legs still ached and the scars remained tight and angry red. Ethan said the color would fade eventually, but for now, they were a stark reminder of what had been done to her. The week Daniel had given her passed, then another week, and he did not come. Helena was relieved and hurt in equal measure. She had not wanted to see him, but his absence felt like another betrayal, another confirmation that she did not matter to him. He is a coward, Ethan said bluntly when Helena mentioned it one evening. They were sitting on the porch of his cabin, watching the sun set over the distant hills. The sky was painted in shades of orange and pink, and the air was finally cooling after another scorching day. He is my husband, Helena said, though the words felt hollow. That does not mean he is not a coward. A real man would have stood by you, believed you, protected you. He did none of those things. Ethan's voice was passionate, and Helena turned to look at him. You deserve better than that. What do I deserve? Helena asked softly. Ethan met her gaze, and the intensity in his eyes made her breath catch. You deserve someone who sees your strength, someone who respects your mind and your spirit, someone who would move heaven and earth to keep you safe and happy. Someone like you? The words came out before Helena could stop them, and she saw Ethan's eyes widen. Helena, he said, and her name on his lips sounded like a prayer. I should not. You are married. It is not right. Nothing about any of this is right, Helena said. My marriage is a lie has been from the start. Daniel does not love me. I am not even sure he likes me. And I think I have known for a while now that I do not love him either. Maybe I never did. What are you saying? Ethan's voice was rough. Helena took a breath, gathering her courage. I am saying that these past weeks with you have been the happiest of my life. You have taken care of me, talked to me like I matter, treated me with more respect and kindness than anyone ever has. And I hope that maybe you feel something for me too. Ethan closed his eyes, his jaw tight. You have no idea how much I feel for you. It is all I can do not to touch you every time I am near you, not to tell you how beautiful you are, how brave, how extraordinary. But you are married, Helena, and I will not be the kind of man who takes advantage of a woman in a vulnerable position. You would not be taking advantage, Helena said. She reached out and took his hand, feeling the calluses on his palm, the strength in his fingers. I am choosing this. I am choosing you, Ethan Quinn, if you will have me. Ethan opened his eyes and looked at her, and Helena saw everything she needed to see in his face. He loved her. He had probably loved her for weeks now, and he had been too honorable to say so. We should do this properly, Ethan said. You need to end your marriage first. Get a divorce or an annulment if that is possible. I will not have people saying I stole another man's wife. I will go to town tomorrow, Helena said. I will talk to a lawyer. There must be grounds for annulment. The marriage was never really a true marriage, and if not, then divorce. I do not care what people say. I just want to be free. I will come with you, Ethan said. I will not let you face that alone. Helena smiled, feeling lighter than she had in months, maybe years. Thank you for everything, for saving my life and for making me want to live it again. Ethan raised her hand to his lips and kissed her knuckles gently. You saved yourself, Helena. I just provided bandages and a place to rest. The strength was always yours. They sat together on the porch until the stars came out, hands linked, talking about the future with a hope that felt almost dangerous. But Helena was done being afraid. She had survived her mother-in-law's cruelty and her husband's betrayal. She had healed from burns that could have killed her. She could survive anything, especially with Ethan beside her. The next morning they rode into Shafter together, Ethan driving the wagon slowly to spare Helena's still tender legs. The town was small, just a main street with a handful of buildings, but there was a lawyer's office above the general store. Helena climbed the stairs carefully, leaning on her cane with Ethan right behind her. The lawyer was an older man named Mr. Porter, with spectacles and ink-stained fingers. He listened to Helena's story with increasing concern, making notes on a piece of paper. The deliberate burning would certainly constitute grounds for divorce, Mr. Porter said. Extreme cruelty is recognized by Texas law. The challenge will be proving it was deliberate rather than accidental. I will testify, Ethan said. I treated her burns. The pattern and severity were not consistent with an accident. And you are? Mr. Porter asked. Ethan Quinn. I have medical training from the war. I worked as a field medic for 4 years. Mr. Porter made another note. That will help. Mrs. Whitmore, you should know that pursuing a divorce will be difficult and potentially scandalous. Your husband's family will likely contest it, and the proceedings could take months. Are you prepared for that? I am prepared for anything that leads to my freedom, Helena said firmly. Very well, I will draw up the papers and file them with the court in Fort Davis. In the meantime, I would advise you to stay somewhere safe. If your in-laws feel threatened by this action, they may retaliate. She is staying with me, Ethan said. They will not touch her again. They left the lawyer's office with a plan in place. It would take time, but Helena would be free. As they walked back to the wagon, Helena felt a weight lift from her shoulders. She was taking control of her life finally, and it felt wonderful. But as they turned the corner onto Main Street, Helena's heart sank. Daniel was standing by the wagon, his face red with anger, and his parents were with him. Martha's eyes were cold and hard, and Samuel looked grim. There you are, Daniel said, his voice loud enough to draw attention from passers-by. I have been looking for you. It is time to come home. I am not going home with you, Daniel, Helena said, keeping her voice steady. I am divorcing you. Mr. Porter is filing the papers today. Martha let out a sound that was half gasp, half shriek. You ungrateful girl, after everything we have done for you. You burned me, Helena said, her voice carrying clearly. You threw boiling water on my legs because I dared to disagree with you, and you nearly killed me. I will not go back to a house where I am in danger. People were stopping now, listening. Martha's face went white, then red. That is a lie. It was an accident. It was not an accident, and we both know it. Helena's fear was fading, replaced by a righteous anger. You hated me from the moment Daniel brought me home. You resented me for being educated, for having opinions, for existing. And when I would not cower and be silent, you tried to destroy me. You will regret this, Martha hissed. We will fight your divorce. We will make sure everyone knows what kind of woman you are, living in sin with this cowboy. I have lived in sin with no one, Helena said. Mr. Quinn saved my life and has been a complete gentleman, which is more than I can say for your son, who could not even be bothered to visit his injured wife. Daniel flinched at that. I came to see you. Once. You came once, and you spent the entire time accusing me of lying and demanding I apologize to the woman who burned me. Helena's voice broke slightly, but she pressed on. You are a weak man. Daniel, I thought I was marrying someone kind and strong, but you are neither. You are your mother's puppet, and I will not waste another day of my life pretending otherwise. She turned away from them, and Ethan helped her up onto the wagon seat. Her hands were shaking, but she felt proud of herself. She had told the truth publicly, and she had not backed down. This is not over, Samuel called after them as Ethan climbed up beside her and took the reins. We will see you in court, and we will make sure you leave this marriage with nothing. I do not want anything from you, Helena called back. I just want my freedom. Ethan drove the wagon out of town, and neither of them spoke until they were well away from Shafter. Then Helena let out a shaky laugh. I cannot believe I did that, she said. I have never stood up to anyone like that in my life. You are magnificent, Ethan said, and the admiration in his voice made Helena's heart soar. You were strong and brave and truthful. I was proud to stand beside you. I was terrified, Helena admitted, but also it felt good to finally say what I needed to say, to stop being afraid. That is courage, Ethan said. Being afraid, but doing it anyway. They rode back to the cabin in comfortable silence. Helena's legs ached from the standing and the tension, but it was a manageable pain. She was getting stronger every day, and now she had something to be strong for, a future that was hers to choose. The weeks that followed were strange and wonderful. Helena continued to heal, her legs growing stronger, and the scars beginning to fade from angry red to pale pink. She helped Ethan around the cabin as much as she could, learning to cook his favorite meals and tending the small vegetable garden behind the house. It felt like playing house, like pretending at a life that was not quite real yet. But in the evenings, when they sat together and talked, it felt very real. Ethan told her more about his past, about the nightmares he sometimes had from the war, about the loneliness he had felt drifting from place to place. Helena shared her own fears and hopes, her dreams of teaching, of having a home that felt safe and welcoming. And slowly, carefully, they began to touch. Just hands held across the table at first, then Ethan's arm around her shoulders as they sat on the porch, a kiss on her forehead when he helped her to bed. They were both holding back, waiting for the divorce to be final, but the attraction between them was undeniable. 2 months after the papers were filed, Mr. Porter sent word that the court date had been set for the following week in Fort Davis. Helena's stomach churned with nerves as she and Ethan prepared for the trip. It would take a day and a half to get there, and they would need to stay in town for at least a few days while the court proceedings took place. They left early on a Monday morning, the wagon loaded with their belongings and supplies for the journey. The trip was long and dusty, but Helena did not mind. She watched the landscape change as they traveled, the flat desert scrubland giving way to rockier terrain. Ethan pointed out landmarks along the way, telling her stories about the region. They stopped for the night at a small way station, where they rented separate rooms, maintaining propriety even though Helena longed to fall asleep in Ethan's arms. But they had waited this long. They could wait a little longer. Fort Davis was larger than Shafter, with several hotels and a bustling main street. The courthouse was an imposing building of stone, and Helena felt her anxiety spike as they approached it on the morning of the hearing. Inside, the courtroom was hot and stuffy despite the early hour. Daniel and his parents were already there, sitting on the opposite side of the room with their own lawyer, a sharp-faced man who looked at Helena with obvious disdain. Helena took her seat beside Mr. Porter, with Ethan sitting in the row behind her for moral support. The judge was a stern-looking man in his 60s, with gray hair and eyes that seemed to see everything. He called the proceedings to order and asked Mr. Porter to state the grounds for divorce. Mr. Porter laid out the case clearly and concisely, describing the burns Helena had sustained and arguing that such extreme cruelty was more than sufficient grounds for divorce under Texas law. He called Ethan to testify, and Helena watched as Ethan took the stand and calmly, professionally described the extent of her injuries and his expert opinion that they could not have been caused by an accident. The Whitmore's lawyer tried to discredit Ethan, suggesting that he had inappropriate feelings for Helena and was therefore biased in his testimony. Ethan remained calm under the questioning, simply stating that he had treated Helena out of basic human decency and that his medical opinion was based on years of training and experience, not on personal feelings. Then it was Helena's turn to testify. She walked to the witness stand on legs that shook only slightly and placed her hand on the Bible to swear her oath. Under Mr. Porter's gentle questioning, she told her story. The verbal abuse from her mother-in-law, the constant criticism, the escalating anger that had led to that terrible morning. She described how Martha had grabbed the kettle deliberately, had poured the boiling water directly onto her legs, had stood over her afterward and said it was Helena's fault for pushing her too far. The Whitmore's lawyer tried to tear apart her testimony, suggesting she was lying to escape a marriage she regretted, that she was making false accusations to justify running off with another man. Helena kept her composure, answering each question honestly and firmly. Then the lawyer made a mistake. He asked Helena to show the court her scars, clearly not believing they were as bad as she claimed. Helena looked at the judge. "May I, Your Honor?" The judge nodded, his expression grave. Helena stood and lifted her skirts to her knees, revealing the scars that covered both legs. The courtroom went silent. Even months after the burning, the scars were still visible, the skin discolored and puckered in places where the burns had been deepest. "Thank you, Mrs. Whitmore," the judge said quietly. "You may be seated." Martha was called to testify next, and she stuck to her story that it had been an accident, that Helena had startled her. But her testimony was less convincing after everyone had seen the evidence written on Helena's body. Daniel testified as well, claiming he had never seen his mother abuse Helena, that he believed it had been an accident. His weak defense of his mother only seemed to make the judge more skeptical. After all the testimony had been heard, the judge called for a recess to consider his ruling. Helena and Ethan waited in the courthouse hallway, both too nervous to speak much. Helena's legs ached from the standing and the stress, and she sat on a hard wooden bench, trying to breathe slowly. An hour later, they were called back into the courtroom. The judge looked tired as he picked up his gavel. "I have reviewed the testimony and evidence presented in this case," he said. "While divorce is never granted lightly, the law is clear that extreme cruelty is sufficient grounds. The evidence of Mrs. Helena Whitmore's injuries is undeniable, and I find her testimony credible and compelling. The pattern and severity of the burns support her claim that this was a deliberate act, not an accident. Therefore, I am granting Mrs. Whitmore's petition for divorce on the grounds of extreme cruelty. The marriage between Helena Livingston Whitmore and Daniel Whitmore is hereby dissolved." The gavel came down with a sound like thunder, and Helena felt tears streaming down her face. She was free. After all these months, she was finally free. Martha let out a wail of protest, but Samuel pulled her from the courtroom, before she could make more of a scene. Daniel just sat there, his face pale and shocked. For a moment, his eyes met Helena's, and she saw something like regret there. But it was too late for regrets now. Mr. Porter shook Helena's hand and congratulated her. You will need to file paperwork to reclaim your maiden name if you wish. But the divorce is final as of today. Thank you, Helena said, her voice thick with emotion. Thank you so much. When they finally left the courthouse, Ethan swept Helena into his arms, holding her close, despite the people passing by. You did it, he murmured into her hair. You are free. We are free, Helena corrected, pulling back to look up at him. Both of us. They stayed in Fort Davis for 2 more days, taking care of the paperwork and allowing Helena time to rest. On the last evening before they were to return to Shafter, Ethan took her to dinner at the nicest restaurant in town. It was not fancy by city standards, but it felt like the most elegant meal Helena had ever had. Over dessert, Ethan reached across the table and took her hand. Helena Livingston, he said, using her maiden name with a smile. I know we have not known each other long, but these past months with you have been the happiest of my life. You are the strongest, bravest, most extraordinary woman I have ever met, and I love you. I have loved you almost since the moment I saw you, if I am being honest. Helena's heart was pounding. I love you too, Ethan. I think I have loved you since you first promised to help me heal. Then marry me, Ethan said simply. Not right away, we can wait as long as you need. But someday, when you are ready, marry me. Build a life with me. Let me spend the rest of my days trying to make you as happy as you make me. Yes, Helena said, not needing to think about it for even a second. Yes, I will marry you. As soon as possible, because I am done waiting for my life to start. I want to start living it right now. With you. Ethan's smile could have lit up the entire town. He pulled her to her feet and kissed her, there in the middle of the restaurant, and Helena did not care who saw. She was free, she was in love, and she was finally happy. They were married a month later in a simple ceremony at the small church in Shafter. The Robertson family, who owned the ranch where Ethan worked, stood as witnesses and hosted a small celebration afterward. Helena wore a dress of pale blue cotton that she had sewn herself, and Ethan wore his best shirt and a new vest. It was nothing like the elaborate wedding she had had with Daniel, and that made it perfect. As they stood before the minister and said their vows, Helena thought about how far she had come. 5 months ago, she had been trapped in a nightmare marriage, suffering abuse that had nearly killed her. Now she stood beside a man who loved and respected her, promising to build a life together based on trust and partnership. When the minister pronounced them husband and wife and Ethan kissed her, Helena felt like she could fly. They moved into a small house on the edge of the Robertson ranch, a wedding gift from Mr. Robertson, who had grown fond of both of them. It was just 3 rooms and a porch, but it was theirs, and Helena loved it immediately. She planted flowers in the front yard and vegetables in the back, and she made curtains for the windows from fabric she bought at the general store. Ethan continued to work as a cowboy, but he also began to offer his medical services to the community. Word spread that there was someone in Shafter who could treat injuries and illnesses, and people began to seek him out. Helena helped when she could, learning from Ethan and assisting with patients. It reminded her of her dream to teach, and she found she loved the work of helping people. One evening, about 6 months after their wedding, Helena was preparing dinner when Ethan came home with news. The school teacher in Shafter is moving away, he said. Her husband got a job in Dallas, and they are leaving at the end of the month. The town council is looking for someone to take over the school. Helena's heart leaped. Do you think they would consider me? I think you should apply and find out, Ethan said, kissing her forehead. You would be an amazing teacher, Helena. Those children would be lucky to have you. Helena applied for the position the next day, and after an interview with the town council, she was hired. The pay was modest, but Helena did not care. She had a chance to do work she loved, to make a difference in children's lives. The school was a one-room building with benches and a chalkboard, and Helena threw herself into preparing for the new term. She organized the books, planned lessons, and met with the families who would be sending their children to her. Most were supportive, though a few gave her suspicious looks when they learned she was divorced. But Mr. Robertson vouched for her character, and his word carried weight in the community. When the school year started, Helena had 17 students ranging from age 6 to 14. Teaching them was challenging and exhausting and absolutely wonderful. Helena loved seeing the moment when a child grasped a new concept, loved nurturing their curiosity and encouraging their dreams. At home, her relationship with Ethan deepened into something rich and beautiful. They worked together, supported each other, laughed together. Ethan never tried to control her or diminish her the way Daniel had. Instead, he celebrated her accomplishments and encouraged her to pursue her passions. A year after they married, Helena realized she was pregnant. She told Ethan one evening after dinner, watching his face carefully to gauge his reaction. His eyes went wide, then filled with joy. "A baby? We are going to have a baby?" "In about 6 months," Helena confirmed. "Are you happy?" "Happy does not begin to cover it," Ethan said, pulling her into his arms. "I am over the moon. I am ecstatic. I am the luckiest man alive." The pregnancy was healthy but tiring. Helena continued to teach until her 7th month, when climbing the steps to the schoolhouse became too difficult. The town council understood and found a temporary replacement until after the baby came. Helena gave birth on a warm spring morning in 1884, with Ethan by her side and a midwife from Fort Davis assisting. The labor was long and hard, and there were moments when Helena wondered if she had the strength to continue. But Ethan held her hand and talked her through it, using all his medical knowledge to help her and the midwife. When the baby finally arrived, a healthy boy with a loud cry and a shock of dark hair, Helena wept with joy and relief. Ethan cut the cord with shaking hands, tears streaming down his face as he held his son for the first time. They named him James after Ethan's father. James Quinn had bright gray eyes like his father and a determined spirit that showed itself early. He rarely cried, but was always watchful, taking in everything around him with solemn attention. Helena fell completely in love with her son, marveling at every tiny detail of him. She had not known it was possible to feel so much love, so much protectiveness. When she looked at James, she understood why Ethan had been willing to fight so hard to save her. Life was precious, and this new life they had created together was the most precious thing of all. She returned to teaching when James was 3 months old, bringing him to school with her in a basket. The children loved having a baby in the classroom, and the older girls took turns helping to watch him during recess. It was unconventional, but it worked. 2 years later, Helena gave birth to their second child, a daughter they named Margaret after Ethan's sister. Margaret had Helena's auburn hair and Ethan's smile, and she was as spirited as James was serious. The two children were devoted to each other from the start, James protective of his little sister, and Margaret adoring her big brother. The years passed in a blur of happiness. Ethan built up his medical practice until he was able to leave the ranch work behind and focus entirely on doctoring. He built an addition onto their house to serve as an office and examination room, and Helena often assisted him with patients between her teaching duties. Helena continued to teach, becoming beloved in the community. She pushed her students to think critically, to ask questions, to dream beyond the boundaries of their small town. Several of her students went on to attend university, and Helena felt proud every time she heard of their accomplishments. Occasionally, she would hear news of the Whitmores. Daniel had remarried, a quiet woman from El Paso, and they had several children. Helena felt nothing when she heard this, no jealousy or regret. That part of her life felt like it had happened to a different person. Martha and Samuel were still on their farm, but they had grown old and bitter. Martha, in particular, had become something of a pariah in the community after the truth about what she had done came out. Helena felt no satisfaction in this. She had moved on, built a good life, and that was enough. When Helena was 30, Ethan surprised her with a piano. He had saved for months to buy it, arranging for it to be shipped from San Antonio. Helena cried when she saw it, remembering how she had loved to play as a child before her mother died and her father sold the piano. She taught herself to play again, her fingers slowly remembering the movements. She taught her children to play as well, and soon their house was filled with music. On Sunday evenings, neighbors would sometimes gather on their porch to listen to Helena play while Ethan sang in his deep baritone. Those evenings felt magical, filled with community and warmth and love. Helena gave birth twice more, first to another son named Samuel, and 3 years later to a daughter named Rose. Their house was full and loud and chaotic, but it was everything Helena had ever dreamed of. On quiet nights, after the children were asleep, Helena and Ethan would sit on their porch and talk, just as they had in those early days when she was healing. Sometimes Helena would trace the scars on her legs, still visible though faded to pale silver lines. They no longer hurt, but they remained as a reminder of where she had come from. "Do you ever regret it?" Ethan asked once, watching her trace the scars. "Everything that happened, even though it brought you here?" Helena considered the question carefully. "I regret the pain," she said. "I regret the cruelty and the fear, but I do not regret where it led me. Those scars are part of my story, part of what made me strong enough to choose this life. So no, I do not regret it, not if this is where I ended up." Ethan took her hand and kissed it, just as he had that first time on the porch all those years ago. "I love you, Helena Quinn. You are the best thing that ever happened to me. And you are my miracle," Helena said, "the cowboy who healed my burns and taught me what love really means." As the years continued to pass, Helena watched her children grow. James became a lawyer, fighting for justice with the same determination he had shown as a child. Margaret became a doctor, inspired by watching her father care for patients. Samuel took over a ranch of his own, proving to be a natural with horses and cattle. And Rose became a teacher like her mother, opening a school for girls in El Paso. Ethan's practice thrived, and he became known throughout West Texas as a skilled and compassionate doctor. He trained several young men in medicine, passing on the knowledge he had gained during the war and the decades since. He never charged those who could not afford to pay, and his generosity earned him the love of the entire community. Helena taught for 30 years before finally retiring at the age of 51. By then, she had taught hundreds of children, including many of her own grandchildren. At her retirement party, the town presented her with a plaque honoring her service, and former students came from as far as Houston to celebrate with her. In their later years, Helena and Ethan traveled some, visiting their children and grandchildren scattered across Texas. They took a trip to Chicago to visit Ethan's sister Margaret, now elderly herself but still sharp and welcoming. They even returned to San Antonio, where Helena showed Ethan the cathedral she had loved as a child. The colored light through the windows was just as beautiful as she remembered. But no matter where they went, they always returned to their little house in Shafter. It was home in a way nowhere else could be, filled with memories of their life together. On their 30th wedding anniversary, Ethan arranged for them to spend the evening alone, their children taking the grandchildren for the night. He cooked dinner himself, the same simple stew he had made for her all those years ago when she was healing. They ate by candlelight, talking and laughing as they reminisced about the past 3 decades. "Do you remember the first time I changed your bandages?" Ethan asked with a smile. "You were so brave, trying not to cry, even though I know it hurt terribly." "I remember thinking you had the gentlest hands I had ever felt," Helena said, "and the kindest eyes. I fell a little bit in love with you that day, even though I tried not to." "I fell in love with you the moment I saw you in that wagon," Ethan admitted. "You were in such pain, but there was a strength in you that took my breath away. I knew right then that you were going to be someone extraordinary." "We have had a good life, have we not?" Helena said, reaching across the table to take his hand. "The best life," Ethan agreed. "Better than I ever dreamed possible." They finished dinner and went to sit on the porch, as they had done thousands of times before. The stars were brilliant overhead. The air was cool and sweet with the scent of Helena's roses. Ethan put his arm around her, and Helena leaned into him, feeling safe and loved and content. I would do it all again, Helena said softly. Every moment, every pain, every joy. I would do it all again to end up right here with you. As would I, Ethan said, kissing the top of her head. You are my heart, Helena. You always have been, and you always will be. They sat together in the darkness, two people who had found each other in the midst of trauma and built something beautiful from the ashes of pain. The scars on Helena's legs had long since faded to barely visible lines, but the love between them had only grown stronger with time. It was not the ending Helena had once imagined for herself, but it was better than any fairy tale because it was real and earned and true. She had been burned, had healed, and had discovered that sometimes the most beautiful things in life grow from the darkest moments. In the house behind them, their grandchildren's drawings covered the walls. In the yard, roses bloomed that Helena had planted with her own hands. In the town beyond, people lived healthier lives because of Ethan's care and more educated lives because of Helena's teaching. Their legacy stretched out in all directions, touching countless lives. But in that moment on the porch, with Ethan's arm around her and the stars overhead, Helena was not thinking about legacy or impact. She was simply present, grateful, and deeply, completely happy. The cowboy who had healed her burns had given her so much more than just physical healing. He had given her a life worth living, a love worth fighting for, and a future filled with hope. And as they sat together in the peaceful Texas night, surrounded by the evidence of the beautiful life they had built together, Helena knew that she was exactly where she was meant to be, with exactly the person she was meant to be with. The journey had been difficult. The scars, both physical and emotional, were real, but they had healed together. And in that healing, they had found not just survival, but joy. The years continued to pass gently. Helena and Ethan grew old together, their hair turning silver, their movements slowing, but their love never diminishing. They celebrated 50 years of marriage, surrounded by children, grandchildren, and great-grandchildren, a testament to the family they had built, from nothing but love and determination. When Ethan passed away peacefully in his sleep at the age of 84, Helena grieved deeply but without regret. They had been given more time together than many couples ever received, and every moment had been precious. She lived 3 more years after his death, spending her days with her family and her evenings on the porch where they had spent so many nights together. When Helena died at 81, her children found a letter she had written to be read after her passing. In it, she told the story of how she and Ethan had met, of the burns and the healing and the love that had grown from tragedy. She wrote about the importance of choosing courage over fear, of believing in second chances, of knowing that you deserve to be treated with kindness and respect. The scars on my legs were a reminder of human cruelty, she wrote, but they were also a reminder of human kindness, of the power of compassion to heal even the deepest wounds. Your father saved my life in every way a person can be saved, and in return, I like to think I gave him a reason to stop wandering and start building a home. We healed each other, and together we created something beautiful. May you all be so lucky as to find someone who sees your worth and loves you with their whole heart. That is the greatest blessing life can offer. The letter was passed down through generations, along with the story of Helena and Ethan's love. Their descendants remembered them as proof that even in the darkest moments, hope can survive. That cruelty does not have the final word. That healing is possible and love can transform everything. And in Shafter, Texas, where their story had unfolded, people still talked about the school teacher and the cowboy who had loved each other so completely. Their little house still stood on the edge of what had once been the Robertson Ranch, and Helena's roses still bloomed every spring, tended now by great-great-grandchildren who had never met them but knew their story. It was a love story forged in fire and healed through patience, a story of survival and strength, of choosing life even after trauma tried to destroy it. Most of all, It was a story of two people who had found each other against all odds and built a life that honored the second chance they had been given. The burns had healed, leaving only scars. But from those scars grew a love that lasted a lifetime and a legacy that would endure for generations. And that, Helena and Ethan would have agreed, was the happiest ending anyone could ask for.